The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
President Donald Trump has made his first of potentially several nominations to the Supreme Court, this time going with an anti-science ideologue named Neil Gorsuch, a federal judge from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit. This is the seat that Republicans may well end up stealing from former President Barack Obama. Will be an absolute deciding factor from a mathematical point of view as the ninth on a Supreme Court that has been with only 8 justices for nearly a year. In total reality show fashion, it happened at the White House. Let's take a look and listen to this entire thing.
Today, I am keeping another promise to the American people by nominating Judge Neil Gorsuch of the United States Supreme Court to be of the United States Supreme Court. And I would like to ask Judge Gorsuch and his wonderful wife, Louise, to please step forward. Please, Louise, Judge. Here they come. Here they come.
Wow, awkward. Yeah, so Trump a little confused there, bringing on Neil Gorsuch of the Supreme Court to be on the Supreme Court. Not clear Trump knew what the hell was going on, but in any case, it happened. Neil Gorsuch is the son of Ronald Reagan's Environmental Protection Agency head Ann Gorsuch Burford. He regularly speaks at Federalist Society conferences, who helped Trump build his Supreme Court pick list. Potential conflict of interest there. This reminds me of when Dick Cheney was brought on by George W. Bush to help him find a vice president, ended up picking himself. And again, the guy who was involved with the organization that helped Trump make the list is the guy that Trump ultimately picked here. Very, very right wing. This guy is a proponent for literal, and these are words which might sound sort of innocuous, but they really are code for an extremely ideological right winger. An originalist, a textualist in terms of his interpretations of the Constitution, very similar ideologically to Antonin Scalia, would not change the balance of the court in that sense with regard to when the court had 9 individuals with Antonin Scalia. And SCOTUS blog references or describes Gorsuch as an ardent defender of religious liberties and pluralistic accommodations for religious adherents, as well as a, quote, natural successor to Antonin Scalia. I don't know about you, Pat, but anybody that would naturally be able to succeed Antonin Scalia is someone I'm very scared of.
And they're all strict constitutionalists in all 4 states' rights, except when it comes to choosing the president of the United States.
Yes.
In 2000, Bush v. Gore.
Says he wept when he found out that Antonin Scalia had passed away. Voted for the Hobby Lobby ruling that gave companies the right to deny women contraceptives, said that Obamacare underwrites payments for drugs or devices that can have the effect of destroying a fertilized human egg, which is, of course, medically inaccurate, right? I mean, it's just not accurate that that's what contraceptives or IUDs or morning after pills do. This is total non-science BS. Strongly against assisted suicide, which is legal in 5 states, and euthanasia. He's written a book about these things. We have a cover of the book here. The Future of Assisted Suicide and Euthanasia. No judicial record on abortion, but if you had to guess, Pat, what would you think this guy's views on abortion are?
I would say he would call himself pro-life.
Yes, that's how he would describe himself. Strongly endorsed by the powerful Americans United for Life law firm. He is according to NARAL, pro-choice America's president. Gorsuch represents an existential threat to legal abortion in the United States. No judicial record on marriage equality, but he said it should be settled through legislatures and elections, not courts, which of course tells us he is at odds with the Supreme Court ruling from a year plus ago, which said state bans on same-sex marriage are not allowable. And he also voted for ruling against a transgender woman who was being denied consistent access to hormone therapy while incarcerated. This is bad. This is really, really bad. And we actually have a quote here about his view on sort of more broadly issues of the power of different branches of government. American liberals have become addicted to the courtroom as the primary means of affecting their social agenda on everything from gay marriage to assisted suicide. What's so ironic is that based on that comment, there are right-wingers who would say, this guy is clearly against using the courts for activism. But you can tell from his quote, Pat, that this is his judicial activism. He is a judicial activist in this way.
This is kind of the milquetoast, run-of-the-mill Republican choice. But the bigger angle here is, what are the Democrats going to do in response? Because they're kind of in between a rock and a hard place here.
Well, I think that, number one, we shouldn't even be here, right? President Obama had nearly a year left on his second term when Antonin Scalia passed away. Republicans said, well, we're too close to the next election, so we're going to wait so that the American people can choose the president who will decide on who will replace Antonin Scalia. Americans had chosen the president that would decide on Supreme Court picks up to January 20th of 2017. It was completely arbitrary, capricious, and a complete political sideshow for Republicans to not allow President Obama to have his say there. Chuck Schumer has said Democrats are going to demand 60 votes, which hints that there may be a filibuster coming here. 60 votes are needed to break a filibuster. I am completely on board with Democrats doing everything they can to fight this to the end. Block it. Wait 4 years. Say, hey, you know what? After all, Donald Trump only has 3 years, 11 months, and roughly 15 days until he would be replaced by the next president. Why don't we wait so we can let the American people have a say? And what I'm getting at is that there's no magic about 11 and a half months, right? We were only 11 and a half months away from the next president being inaugurated, so Obama doesn't get to pick. Well, then Trump doesn't get to pick either by the same harebrained logic.
I mean, I think they're kind of screwed either way, because either you allow this to happen, you allow this judge to go through, and then you're kind of considered a pushover liberal in the Senate, or you obstruct, and then this long history of bipartisanship when it comes to putting people on the court is just completely gone with.
It was gone when Republicans said that Merrick Garland isn't getting through. And I completely think that, although you're right that in a way it may be between a rock and a hard place, do not allow this guy on. Do it. Just use the exact same roadblocks that Republicans used. There's a number of interesting articles that have surfaced in the last 48 hours or so, asking sort of the same question I've been asking, which is whether this entire sprint of insanity from the Trump administration is not so much about the specifics of executive orders and firings and policies themselves, but a sort of test or introduction to some broader goal. And I suggested generally on Monday's show the idea that the theme is consolidation of power for personal gain for Donald Trump through initially extreme proposals to be stepped back from slightly in the future, combined with a disinformation campaign, not meant necessarily to get people to believe the specifics of what Trump or Sean Spicer or Kellyanne Conway or Mike Pence say, but rather to get people to really question whether they can believe anything that they hear and create this sort of disconnect between the truth as it objectively exists and the public understanding or point of view on an issue. And several articles have emerged discussing this. One has been very much shared online. It's called Trial Balloon for a Coup by Jonathan Zunger. Another is called The Immigration Ban is a Head Fake and We're Falling for It by Jake Fuentes. They approach this, as do I, in slightly different ways, but there are some trends here that at this point are very hard to deny. And that's that this entire first couple weeks of the Trump administration is a test to the limits of how the administration is going to be able to sort of skirt the law and other government agencies while setting up the real policies that they want. So let's look at this list of the real Trump game here, okay? Step one is you create some shock events. So this includes the executive orders, the banning of immigrants and people with green cards. Then a judge says, oh, well, people with green cards can come in and people start paying less attention. But Trump ends up with 90% of what he initially proposed or ordered. And it's a shock event in every sense. It wasn't cleared with too many people in the Trump administration before being announced. Immigrations and customs authorities were not properly prepared. You use the shock event to then back off of slightly and still pass 90% of what you wanted with people paying far less attention. The second layer is you get opposition growing, you get media coverage, civil rights organizations like the ACLU filing lawsuits, lawyers and protesters all over airports. No one knows exactly what's legal, what isn't. It exposes to the Trump administration who is really loyal and who isn't. This includes, for example, reports of border agents defying stays from courts on the Trump travel ban, according to both congressmen and lawyers, and choosing to detain people anyway. This is really valuable information for the Trump administration, which is which agencies will follow and support him, even in violation of what the judicial system says. If you're attempting a soft coup or a sort of authoritarian takeover, when agencies ignore courts, that is very useful for you to know. And by the way, the fear is always, oh, the left could become tyrannical and take your guns or whatever. It's hard to get more tyrannical than law enforcement ignoring the orders of judges and courts. Can you trust the Department of Homeland Security? Can you trust the Attorney General's office? This is really valuable information for Trump that comes from the opposition and media coverage. Then, number three, during the chaos that's going on because of the shock events you've caused, you continue to make moves that will have less attention paid to them. For example, putting alt-right propagandist Stephen Bannon on the National Security Council as a standing member. We covered it. It got some coverage on corporate media, but it's hard to keep the pressure on it since the chaos is nonstop from the immigration order. Another example of making moves during the chaos, the State Department senior leadership is fired. Originally, it was reported that they all quit at the State Department. Now it appears they were told to. It eliminates continuity. It enables Trump's inner circle to further consolidate power by handling the transition at the State Department themselves rather with the outgoing staff. And then number four here, and this is really happening frequently, you placate radical groups. This is potentially a really important aspect of the immigration ban, which is Trump may well lose the green card part of the ban permanently. But by doing this, he continues to coalesce the most radical and extreme elements of his base with the Muslim ban, the Muslim immigration ban. The entire not mentioning Jews on the Holocaust remembrance statement, which we now know was deliberate, whether you think it was good, bad, or whatever, it's a sort of wink and nod to the white supremacists. If you look at the online discussion forums, they see that as a direct wink and nod to them. Ask yourself this question. In an authoritarian escalation or soft coup attempt, who's most likely to let Trump do whatever he wants? It's the same people who are going to be appeased by things like the immigration ban and not mentioning Jews on Holocaust Remembrance Day. When Trump was asked just 2.5 months ago if he supports marriage equality, he answered, it's irrelevant because it's already settled. That's a wink and a nod to the homophobes, okay? And then wrapping up the real Trump game, the big picture is continuing to consolidate power. You get Bannon on the National Security Council. You take the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Director of National Intelligence. You only have them in on an as-needed basis. You add power for Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, also now on the National Security Council with a permanent seat. We've talked about Trump's private security force, etc. You shrink the inner circle of power. And then lastly here, number 6, watch the money. Trump made a very interesting move by officially filing for his re-election campaign for 2020 on the day of the inauguration. It's odd, but it allows him more latitude with fundraising. Trump has already raised millions for his re-election campaign, and this actually hampers the ability of nonprofits to criticize Trump as easily because once he's officially a candidate for an election, criticizing Trump if you're a nonprofit could violate the rules which prevent nonprofits from participating in political speech. This is the big picture game here, Pat, and that's what we need to be paying attention to.
It's tough to say whether this is something that was intended or if there's this long drawn out process here.
Sure.
But everything that I can think of that would make this me feel like he was just kind of fumbling around in the dark. Things like not knowing the policy when it comes to green cards, not letting people in his administration know to some extent. The people that drafted this were on the House Judiciary Committee as staffers, not the congressmen themselves.
Indeed.
That all kind of plays into the first thing on that list, which is shock events.
And it makes it irrelevant whether Trump is a puppet of people like Steve Bannon, whoever he's a puppet of and doesn't even know what's going on, or whether it's calculated. The effect of it is the same. We need to be aware that this is going on. We're going to cover the individual events, but we've got to keep our eyes on the big picture, which is an authoritarian consolidation of power, which could be misused in disastrous ways. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. Send me your thoughts. Also, tomorrow is, sadly, I'll talk about this more on the bonus show today. Sadly, tomorrow is my birthday, and I hate my birthday at this point. Starting when I was 25, I started liking my birthday less and less, and now I really dislike it. But people have been asking on the internet. Trust me, folks, people are asking whether I'll be doing another birthday membership special, and I will be doing that. Just sign up for our newsletter at davidpacman.com to be notified tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Daniel Formosa. Daniel, thank you so much for supporting the show. We are viewer and listener supported media. If you like this show and if you understand the importance of alternatives to corporate media, particularly in the era of orange presidents, please sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. You can use coupon code IVoted17. We do have a big membership special happening tomorrow. Usually on my birthday, I will do a major membership special, the success of which helps to take my mind off of the fact that I'm another year older. And we will be doing that tomorrow. Just get on our newsletter at davidpakman.com to take advantage of that. All right, it is time for Hatriot Mail. If you're a new viewer or listener to the show and you're not familiar with Hatriot Mail, here's what it is.
We're so alt-right, it's wrong. Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
I experienced some pretty serious disturbance as a result of this week's Hatriot Mail. Let's take a listen to it together.
President Trump. David Pakman is a faggot bitch boy. Kike, why you worried what Trump says about black people that white faggot loves blacks and Latinos? You should be deported to Iraq, you fag. David Fudge Packerman is fake news. He won't even cover Pizzagate. I reserve the right to call someone I don't like a faggot and not get arrested for it.
Why would you deport me to Iraq? Usually it's Argentina, where I was born, or Israel, although I've never lived nor had Israeli citizenship. I don't know how you would justify deporting me there. Fake news now is code for a point of view that you don't like. That's the new thing. That's how fake news is being used. And I won't cover Pizzagate. I mean, this is just insane. And who gets arrested for using slurs about gay people unless you're also combining that with some kind of physical intimidation in some way that would be a crime? Otherwise, people don't get arrested for using LGBT slurs.
I got to be honest. I think my troll alarm is going off here. There's just way too many red flags, and a lot of these sentences just kind of contradict themselves.
Yeah, well, that's one of the two primary characteristics of Hatriot Mail are the message is completely internally or inherently contradictory. And number two, it's written in a way that makes absolutely no sense. So in that way, it's like every other Hatriot Mail that we received. Remember, you can turn Hatriot Mail into something positive. Use coupon code HATRIOT40, HATRIOT40, to get a huge discount off of membership at davidpakman.com/membership. We've already talked about the absurdity of Trump's new Muslim-majority country travel ban. It's illegal, it's immoral, it's ineffective, it was implemented horribly, and it actually makes us less safe. I don't want to rehash that. What I want to get to is that there's a growing talking point on the low information right that's gotten big enough that I need to address it now, especially so that our logic and reason contingent in the audience is prepared to debunk and push back against it. The talking point is as follows. Hey, what Trump is doing is no big deal. because former President Barack Obama also banned refugees and was worried about the same list of countries as what Trump is doing now. And it's basically the exact same thing. So why are you criticizing Trump for something Obama did? Here's an example of this assertion from Donald Trump's Facebook page. Note the highlighted yellow part where Trump said on January 29th, "My policy is similar to what President Obama did in 2011 when he banned visas for refugees from Iraq for 6 months. The 7 countries named in the executive order are the same countries previously identified by the Obama administration as sources of terror." If you want an example of alternative facts, this is at the top of the list. Intentionally and completely misleading, but the Trumpists are loving it. They won't stop emailing me and tweeting me and commenting on YouTube about how this is the same thing Obama did. This is an example of whataboutism. Whataboutism is a Russian, of all sources, propaganda technique when you respond to any criticism with, "What about X?" when X is something else. Before I tell you why this is nothing like what President Obama did, think for a second. If it were true that Obama did the same thing as Trump, wouldn't you have heard at least some right-wingers, the more reasonable ones, praising Obama for doing this during his presidency? The reason they didn't, because President Obama did nothing like this. What the Obama administration did is review the way that we vet refugees from Iraq. Only refugees and only from one country. Obama was not prioritizing Christians and deprioritizing Muslims, as President Trump said that he plans to do. Trump's executive order pertains to all types of non-diplomatic travelers. This includes tourists and business travelers. This is something that is completely unlike what President Obama did. The Obama administration did not prevent anyone from those 7 countries from entering the U.S. on principle. Trump's order has. They listed those countries on a list for actually being banned from entry. What President Obama's list was, and it's true that there's an overlap on the list, the President Obama list served the purpose of reviewing the vetting procedures. The Obama administration didn't even ban refugees from Iraq the way that Trump's defenders are saying that they did. There was not a single month during the entire Obama administration during which Iraqi refugees didn't come to the United States. This was a review of refugee protocol related to specific threats, including an arrest of 2 Iraqi refugees in Kentucky. But again, it is nothing like what President Trump is doing. It just has nothing to do with it.
And it's kind of funny to see Trump groveling in this way, because if you compare Obama's and Trump's approval numbers, they're night and day. Obama's way more popular. So I really hope he doesn't continue using this childish excuse, because there's so many things that Obama did that were right-wing, deporting so many people, the drone strikes. So I hope this connection stops here.
Trump's administration, once again, is trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. The Obama administration's changes to the vetting are still in effect. They already have made the vetting process much more strict. We have the longest vetting process in the world for refugees, 18 to 24 months. Trump is trying to say that his order was not drastic or novel by equating it to what President Obama did, which is also sort of unusual. I thought everything Obama did was bad. Shouldn't Trump just say that Obama was weak on vetting and that what he's doing is different and better? All of a sudden saying that what he's doing is the same as what Obama did is a really weird way to defend his actions.
And even so, it's kind of just a childish excuse. I can get away with it because he got away with it. I mean, that's not how it works in the real world.
No, it should be defended by Trump on its own merits, right? It shouldn't even matter. Not only did Obama not do the same thing, it actually shouldn't matter whether Obama did the same thing. Trump should be able to defend it on its own merits. If you've heard of yellow journalism, we're in a new era now where we're in a world of orange alternative facts. Orange is the new facts, is the way I'm saying it, Pat.
I love it.
I don't know if that one resonates with you at all. Okay. A major Donald Trump campaign promise was actually something that is a longstanding Democratic pledge, which is let Medicare negotiate bulk discounts when it comes to the prices it pays for prescription drugs. Well, that's not going to happen. Another bamboozling by Donald Trump. Yesterday, Donald Trump met with pharmaceutical industry lobbyists and executives, and all of a sudden, Trump comes out of that meeting, and the plan to negotiate drug prices down has disappeared. What's the new plan? Lower taxes and get rid of regulations. Shocked. I am shocked that once again Trump's plan has changed from something that sounded vaguely good for consumers to the standard crony capitalist trickle-down nonsense that helps big corporations and their executives. Most countries that have national health care, and by that I mean most countries at our level of development other than the United States, do this, right? They negotiate better deals on drug prices to include them nationally in their healthcare system. And manufacturing pills is so cheap that it's usually still very profitable for big pharma. We don't have a national healthcare system, but we do have Medicare for seniors, and it's a really big country. So negotiating makes sense. However, there's a 2003 law written by congressional Republicans, signed onto by our old buddy, George W. Bush, and it prohibits the federal government from using that negotiating power. And as recently as January 11th, Trump was ready to revisit the policy and get the negotiation going. Here's what Donald Trump said during a press conference on January 11th. Pharma has a lot of lobbies, a lot of lobbyists, and a lot of power. And there's very little bidding on drugs. We're the largest buyer of drugs in the world, and yet we don't bid properly. Agreed, completely. So let's negotiate. However, Donald Trump met yesterday with pharma lobbyists and pharma executives, and he comes out of the meeting, and what's the new policy for Trump? Take a look at this. Quote, I'll oppose anything that makes it harder for smaller, younger companies to take the risk of bringing their product to a vibrantly competitive market. That includes price fixing by the biggest dog in the market, Medicare. Before it was negotiating for Medicare. Now it's price fixing by Medicare, which is what's happening, Trump went on to say. But we can increase competition and bidding wars big time. So what I want, we have to get lower prices. We have to get even better innovation. And I want you to move your companies back into the United States, and I want you to manufacture in the United States. We're going to be lowering taxes. We're going to be getting rid of regulations that are unnecessary. Key points here. Price fixing by Medicare. In other words, Medicare working to keep prices low. He used to be for that via negotiation. Now he's against it. And of course, the new solution is lower taxes and get rid of regulations, which of course is a way for what? For big pharma to increase their profit margin with absolutely no requirement to pass on the savings to consumers. Does anybody get what's going on here, Pat? On most of the big public policy issues of the day, Trump started out with seemingly populist rhetoric, but he's coming back to the standard establishment Republican trickle-down nonsense every single time.
Yeah, it's really too bad. He campaigned as a populist, and you see more and more now he's taking on the positions of more establishment Republicans. It's obvious that Reince Priebus is in his ear. Oh, yeah. And he also promised that he wasn't going to touch Medicare. He wasn't going to touch Social Security. Sure. So we have to keep him to that. It's
another way, another example of Trump changing his mind to whatever someone told him 5 minutes ago. In this case, in the literal sense, he went in and met with big pharma lobbyists and executives, and 5 minutes later he comes out, he has a totally new position on negotiating drug prices. Make America great again? How does this help the average person? How does this help a lower income, a lower middle class person to afford medications? It doesn't. It doesn't. Discuss this with us on Reddit, davidpakman.com/REDDIT.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to be joined in studio today by Richard Stallman, who is founder and leader of the free software movement. You can learn more about this at GNU.org. That's GNU.org. You're a very colorful character, and in my research of you, I came across so many things that I want to talk about. But let's start with maybe what you're most known for, which is being involved in the free software movement. I know that you don't like when people sometimes incorrectly conflate GNU and Linux. We're talking about two different things. So let's just start there. Talk to us about what is GNU, and then how does Linux relate to that?
Okay, well, the standard question is, what's GNU?
Right.
And the standard answer is GNU's not Unix.
Right.
Because that's what GNU stands for. It's a recursive acronym. It stands for GNU's not Unix. This is programmer's humor, but it has a serious meaning, of course. GNU is the name of the operating system whose development I launched in January 1984, and I decided to make it similar to, that is, you use it the same as Unix, an existing operating system. But the special thing about GNU was it would be entirely free software, entirely freedom-respecting software. The users would have full control over everything in it. Whereas with proprietary systems like Unix or Windows or Mac OS or the stuff in those mobile devices,
Right.
those are not free software. The users do not control them. A company controls those programs, and the programs control the users.
And is that sort of what underlies your advocacy for free software? This
Absolutely.
opposition to companies, big corporations,
It
typically
doesn't
saying-
matter whether they're big or small.
Okay.
The point is, we should control the programs we use and not vice versa. So every program is either free or proprietary. If it's free, that means the users control the program. They control the program separately and they control it collectively at the same time. Both kinds of control are there.
Now, today, there are many more examples of the proprietary than in 84.
Actually, I didn't finish what I was saying.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I do pause. I speak in paragraphs sometimes. So the point is that's free software. But if the users don't control the program, then instead the program controls the users and the proprietor, some company typically, controls the program. So that program is an instrument which gives the proprietor power over users. It's a tool to subjugate people with. That's the injustice that we are trying to put an end to. First step, we escape from it ourselves. I don't use any proprietary software. I won't tolerate it on this computer here. You know, this has only free software in it. We've worked decades to make it possible. You can actually buy a computer pretty much like this that comes with free software already installed for
What
you.
computer is that? Talk to us, especially for people who might only be listening
This
to us.
is a ThinkPad X60S.
IBM.
Well, it was Lenovo, but the point is, nowadays they're selling a somewhat newer model in which they've installed free software. The point is, you don't even have to install the system yourself. You don't have to be a wizard to use free software. But the point is, non-free software is an injustice, so we've got to get rid of it. And nowadays, the proprietors intentionally put malicious functionalities into their proprietary software. Companies you've heard of, such as Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Adobe, they put malicious functionalities in. They put in backdoors, meaning they can remotely control it, whether you like it or not. They put in surveillance functionalities that snoop on the users and send information. They have digital restrictions management, DRM, which means it's designed to refuse to do the things you want with the data that you get. And these are all injustices.
Now, let me, before we get too far off, because I want to keep on one area of this laptop that you pointed out, I believe Intel is on the list of companies whose products you don't use, correct? What's the processor here?
This machine was actually made something like 8 years ago. The latest Intel processors are designed with a backdoor that means it can be remotely controlled by Intel or any government that can compel Intel's cooperation, and we don't know what all those governments are. You must not trust the latest Intel processors, and if you want more information, look at stallman.org/intel.html, I think.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in more detail.
But the point is, it's malicious hardware. We don't know any way to fix that. We can only use older processors at the moment.
So that's what you have here?
Yes.
Okay.
However, people are raising funds to design a new computer that will be manufactured specifically for free software. It has a non-Intel processor, not AMD either. Their newest processors are no good either. But the point is, we keep advancing. So now you can buy a reconditioned computer with only free software in it.
Right.
But if that project gets funding and succeeds, you'll be able to buy a newly made laptop designed for free software.
Now, why just software? And I guess what I mean is this. Any computer, you could have free software and a processor.
You could have free hardware designs.
Well,
Theirs
I guess
are nice,
that, my
but here's the
question,
thing,
my
you
question
can't
was
make
this.
your own processor.
Sure, but I guess my question was, that's sort of what I was getting at, right? Which is, if you have a video card, it presumably has proprietary firmware, if not software.
Well,
so where do you draw the line, I guess?
We draw the line between software that comes embedded and that people aren't going to change, and software at the installed levels of the system.
Right.
Because in a physical piece of hardware, there may be embedded software that we can't even tell is there.
Yeah.
And that certainly users don't consider changing. You know, every keyboard has embedded software. Every disk has embedded software. The processor may have embedded software. The camera, if there is one, has embedded software.
I'm guessing you would never have a laptop with a built-in camera, right?
Well, I'd probably tape it over.
Yeah.
I have I've used such a laptop, I've taped it over, but that's a different issue. If you've got free software, you can be sure it's not turned on. With a proprietary program, you can't trust the developer. Every proprietary program gives you zero security against its own proprietor. The only way that you can have security against the people who develop the software is if they don't have ultimate control. In other words, if it's free software. We, contributors to free software, we don't have ultimate control. We can't make users accept sight unseen whatever we've done. The users can all see, if they look, what we've done. They can compare versions. They can check it. And if they don't like what we've done, they can change it. This is what it means to say the users have ultimate control. Now, the power that proprietary developers have, well, power corrupts. And they have total power over those users, and they know it, and they are thoroughly corrupt. I would say that putting in malicious functionalities is corruption. And if you want to see the full story about the malicious functionalities we know of, look at GNU.org/proprietary. There are dozens of examples there, each one with a reference in the press.
Why do you think that because what you're telling us about should be of concern on a day-to-day basis to many more people than I believe it is a concern for? Do you think it's people have lives that they're living and they don't necessarily have the time to look into the details?
Part of it.
What do you think it is?
But also, you've got to realize that the media, when they cover technology, are funded by advertising by these same companies. And these companies don't encourage the media to consider these questions. If you look at product reviews, you will see that they don't talk about the question of the license of the program. To what extent do the users control it? How can they trust it?
Right.
And I once saw a comparison review of a GNU software package that I had written with various proprietary programs that did a similar job. And the review considered only practical dimensions. It didn't consider the ethical dimension or the freedom dimension at all. So I wrote a letter to the editor afterwards pointing out that this most important point of all was omitted.
What publication was that?
I don't remember. This was in the 1990s.
But in other words, they were talking about features, functionality, speed, etc.,
Yes,
and they ignored the underlying, what you consider to be the
most
ethics of the
important
software.
thing because they never talk about that.
Right.
In 1998, the free software movement was hit by a co-optation campaign designed to separate our software from our philosophy of freedom.
Right.
That campaign goes by the name open source. Now, the reason you've heard that term so much is that a lot of companies preferred to talk about open source, and they wanted the media to talk about open source precisely because that didn't rock the boat. It didn't criticize their proprietary software, didn't call it an injustice. So the companies have put their weight behind the use of the superficial term that doesn't raise ethical issues.
It's very PR friendly to say something
Yes,
is
it
open
is.
source, right?
Right. And they've talked about our work in connection with their slogan so much that most people think that's what I stand for. I refuse to go normally to any event that uses the term open source because I don't want to feed that error.
Well, I want to talk about that. Yeah, let's pause briefly if we can, because I just want to take a short break,
Okay.
and then we're going to talk about more. I'm here with Richard Stallman in studio. You can learn more at gnu.org.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Hey, listen to this. Donald Trump's pick for education secretary, Betsy DeVos, a billionaire, has plagiarized some of her Senate questionnaire for the confirmation process. Can you imagine that? The education nominee is caught copying. Can you believe this insanity? And to add to the sick irony, there's the fact that the only reason she even had a ton of written questions to answer is that Republican Senator Lamar Alexander, who chairs the Senate committee that was questioning her, said, we're going to limit the hearing to just one round of questions. So then a ton of questions were submitted in writing by Democrats, and then the plagiarism begins. Let's look at some examples here, okay? First example that I will put up on the screen for you. Here is Betsy DeVos's statement in her answers. Quote, every child deserves to attend school in a safe, supportive environment where they can learn, thrive, and grow. Here is a quote from the Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General, Vanita Gupta. Quote, every child deserves to attend school in a safe, supportive environment that allows them to thrive and grow. Stunningly similar language there. Let's look at one other example that we also have. Betsy DeVos, quote, opening a complaint for investigation in no way implies that the Office for Civil Rights has made a determination about the merits of the complaint. Of course, guidance from the Department of Education on the same issue, quote, opening a complaint for investigation in no way implies that OCR has made a determination with regard to the merits of the complaint. We teach students that plagiarism is wrong, but we're going to put a plagiarizer in charge of all education in the United States of America. The amount of plagiarism happening within just the Trump world is stunning. Melania Trump plagiarized part of her Republican National Committee speech over the summer from a speech that former First Lady Michelle Obama gave. We saw conservative author Monica Crowley just bail from her selection as senior communications officer for the Trump administration after it was revealed that she had plagiarized not only parts of her 2012 book, but also columns she wrote for the Washington Times, parts of her 2000 PhD dissertation for Columbia University. As President George W. Bush once said, and he said it really eloquently, really important question about education and children. Here is where my mind went as I read about Betsy DeVos's plagiarism. Remember this?
Rarely is the question asked, how is our children learning? As yesterday's positive report card shows, children do learn
Yes,
when standards are high and results are measured.
that's right. Children's do learn, Pat, when standards are high. Hiring a plagiarizer to run the country's education department is not exactly the high standards that will lead to children's learning, as our fearless former president said.
Yeah, this is pretty bad, but I think it would have been even worse on her if she had to undergo a second round of questioning from
You
those
think?
Democrats. I mean, she would have had to talk more about grizzly bears and take questions from people like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Al Franken. It would have been worse, I think.
In all seriousness, I don't know if it would have been worse, because getting caught plagiarizing your answers for Senate confirmation is pretty damn bad.
Yeah, but there's no video clips of it. I mean, those clips were trending all over the internet.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
They were embarrassing her.
Maybe she is better off copying answers on paper and not having to answer more questions from Tim Kaine, who absolutely destroyed her. Al Franken, I think, also did.
Oh, yeah.
Elizabeth Warren participated in it. It was
Bernie
just
Sanders. It was a mess.
Getting clobbered. Yeah, I've never seen anything like it. Hey, we recently said on the show that as progressives, an important part of getting through this presidency and doing what we can to advocate for good policies in Washington is acknowledging when we have something positive done by the White House. And this is for two reasons. Number one is that on some issues, Trump's sort of all over the map politics might actually align with progressive values. It might just be by coincidence, but if it happens, then we should applaud that. But additionally, if we applaud and cheer and show enthusiasm for some of what Trump does, it could actually help to grow the rift between Trump and his base and establishment Republicans, which is also good for progressives because it throws a sort of monkey wrench into what otherwise might be a pretty united, full steam ahead coalition between Trump and establishment Republicans. If we have progressives fully jumping on board with the every once in a while incident of Trump doing something progressives agree with, it may help to further the rift between Trump and establishment Republicans. In this sort of mode of thinking, in the midst of all the horrors of the first 12 days of Trump in office, we have an example of one of those actions. The Trump administration said yesterday that they are not going to be repealing President Barack Obama's 2014 executive order to protect LGBTQ employees of federal contractors from workplace discrimination. It doesn't seem like this should warrant that much applause. It seems sort of like a no-brainer. Obviously, we should be protecting LGBTQ people from workplace discrimination, but that's not always a foregone conclusion when you're talking about the Republican Party. Also, the Trump White House didn't even enact this. They're just saying, we're not going to go out of our way to unprotect LGBTQ employees. But I'll give him this one, at least for now. However, again, if we're thinking that Trump's moves are part of some broader confusion campaign, I do want to remind you that, number one, Donald Trump supports what's called the First Amendment Defense Act bill, which would solely allow individuals, businesses, and nonprofits to discriminate against LGBTQ people without risk of legal consequences. Donald Trump has opposed marriage equality in a number of interviews. Trump was against the Supreme Court national gay marriage ruling. He said to the Christian Broadcasting Network, it's funny he's even talking to them, quote, "That was a shocking decision for you and for me and for a lot of other people." So we have to remember that although we agree with the specifics of not repealing this very obvious discrimination protection order from the Obama administration, there's many red flags and warning signs from Trump when it comes to the LGBTQ community that I don't want to forget because Trump is doing the right thing here by not opposing this.
He did mention the LGBT community quite positively in his convention speech, so I guess that's another positive. But in terms of who he's going to put on the court, that's going to be a net negative for the LGBT community.
No doubt.
Mark this down as a thumbs up, though. I think this is the second thing in his administration that's been positive, along with striking down TPP.
Yeah, which again was dead for months anyway, but at least it was a campaign promise that he is sticking to. Also, I just remembered Trump has been supportive of North Carolina's HB2 transgender bathroom law in some instances, although previously he also said he doesn't care what bathrooms people use. Again, it's all confusion. He'll say whatever he thinks the crowd wants to hear. It's a wink and a nod to the most extreme elements of the Republican base. And as Pat mentioned, Trump did just nominate for the Supreme Court Neil Gorsuch, who has ruled against transgender rights and was against the decision by the Supreme Court to make state same-sex marriage bans illegal. And obviously Mike Pence is vice president, one of the most dangerous ideologues in the country, literally one heartbeat away from the presidency. I don't want to be lulled into a false sense of security that it's all well and good on the horizon for the LGBTQ community under Donald Trump, but I agree with his decision not to undo President Obama's order to protect employees of federal contractors based on membership in LGBTQ communities. We have a voicemail number. The number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here is a voicemail reacting to the International Business Times did a piece last week where I was included in a montage of so-called comedians that were taking on the issue of net neutrality. And here's a voicemail responding to that.
Oh, hey, David. I just wanted to say that I saw your clip next to Stephen Colbert and John Oliver, and I have to say that you are the worst comedian that I've ever heard. You're not funny at all.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What
This
do you
is
make
a
of
comedy
that?
show, right?
Yeah, this is a comedy show, and I'm a terrible comedian. That's what we figured out from this caller. Okay, thank you very much. And I truly don't know if that was serious or not. It sounded very real.
No, he's joking.
He's
joking.
You
Yeah,
think
absolutely.
You think most Hatriot mails and voicemails are jokes, I've noticed.
Not most Hatriot mails, but a lot of the voicemails, I think they're trolling you.
On the bonus show today, I'm having a major problem at my apartment here in Boston. I have not mentioned it to Pat, so we're going to get his sort of honest first reaction on the bonus show. And genuinely, I actually am looking for advice from our members about how to deal with this issue I'm having at my apartment. I'm also going to talk about some major internal drama going on among progressive media. And I do want to talk about a rare correction or retraction issued by Fox News. And it relates to the Quebec mosque shooting that we told you about yesterday. So please sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. Today's bonus show is going to be a doozy. If the normal membership rates strike you as high, use the coupon code IVoted17 to get a discount, and I will talk to you very soon on today's bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.